Thank you all for hanging around. I'm John Costello. I'm a speech-language pathologist at Boston Children's Hospital, where we have a dedicated ALS Augmentative Communication Program. And I'm going to tell you a bit about that. First, I want to tell you, I come from a pretty extraordinary team of people in our clinic. And so these are all of the speech-language pathologists and occupational therapists. But then within this group, we have a smaller core of people who are focusing exclusively on augmentative communication and ALS. And so we've got 4 people who pretty much were a full-time 5-day-a-week clinic focusing on AugCom and ALS. Knowledge is power. And the reason I want to start out saying this is, often when people come into our center to the ALS program, believe it or not, one of the first things I say to them is, my goal is to waste your time, which is not typically what you like to hear when you go into any appointment. The reason I want to start out this conversation with that same statement is that I think it's really important for people to know about opportunities, resources, know that there are strategies that are available, but it's also important as listening to know that you may not need to take advantage of them. And so my goal here and our goal in our clinic is to make sure that we provide as much information as possible so that people are armed with information and so that you can be proactive and frankly, maybe after spending time and energy learning about some things and giving feedback, be able to say, but I never needed that. But at least you knew about it, because also we believe that one of the worst things that can happen is to, in the heat of the moment, have to learn something. So I'm going to talk to you about technology. I'm not going to talk to you about no-tech solutions today, because the title I was given was focused specifically on technology. But I just want to highlight that there is so much more than I'm able to cover in my brief 30 minutes here. So I am going to talk about technology. Technology in supportive care is what I was asked to discuss. And I first want to highlight that in our center and in the world of thinking about technology or assistive technology in ALS, we look at communication and we look at environmental control. And so I want to kind of touch on what each of these is, first of all. And you've heard the term augmentative communication mentioned a couple of times. I want to highlight what that really is by first talking about what is communication. Certainly communication is talking face-to-face, talking in groups. It's also talking on the telephone, which is an augmented means of communicating. It's a backup. You require tools. Using email is something that requires tools. That's augmented communication. Internet access, texting, social media, calling attention to oneself, they're all augmentative strategies. And I highlight that because sometimes the term itself, augmentative communication, can sound very ominous. And many people think only about, well, if I have a hard time speaking, I'll have to learn to use this brand new strategy, when in fact many of us are using technologies throughout the day, and we may be looking at shifting the percentage of time you may be using one strategy versus another. And then what is environmental control? And really highlighting, and I happen to put up here a visual from one particular company where they have environmental control for setting alarms and setting the locks on your house and turning on lamps and the fan and TV, and all that falls under the umbrella of environmental control. And for many people with ALS who are concerned about what if I have a hard time doing something with my hands, we want to focus on the fact and help people understand that there are resources, there are tools and strategies using technology, using assistive technology. So It's also important to highlight when we think about communication technologies, augmentative communication systems, that you don't want to be too early in choosing tools, and you don't want to be too late. And part of the reason I say that is because, frankly, we are living at a time where on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis certainly, new tools and new technologies are coming out. And we're finding sometimes people are advised, well, you might want to look into this particular technology that lots of people who have ALS have found successful and useful, and get it now because it can take time if insurance is going to pay for something. And we'll see people who do that, and if they ever do need that tool, it's not even available on the market, because they sort of got it too quickly. So we always want to look at making sure that there's that balance. There's a lot of technology. These are just a few of the technologies in our center for our ALS communication program. So what I want to do is provide for you as many videos of people using different strategies as possible, so you can hear from folks or see some of these things in action. And again, I have kind of limited time to do this, but I'll try to show as many as possible. One piece of technology that augments communication, and you've heard it mentioned earlier today, is actually using voice amplification. And it's interesting, and some of you may say the same thing. I work with a lot of people where I talk about voice amplification, and they say, I'm loud enough. And often that's when family members, because families almost always come to our center with a person with ALS, that's often when a family member will say, yeah, don't make her any louder. And so people will say, I'm loud enough. And our focus is, it's not so much that you're not loud, it's that for many people, sometime during the day, you become fatigued. When we're talking, we're using a whole group of muscles for breathing, for articulating, for the airflow between the mouth and the nose, for phonation. And all of those muscles, like every other muscle, if you use it over and over again, becomes fatigued. If you can use all those muscles less, you're less fatigued. So I want you to hear, I hope these audios are going to work, from a couple of people, and several of these are on our clinic website, and I'll give you that link at the end.
Well, one of the reasons why I like the amplifier, it saves my voice energy so that I do not get as tired in the evening. And I need to remind myself more every day to use it more, because the first reason when I get tired at night, it's because probably exhausted from expending my voice. But with this amplifier, I can talk slower and also not as loud.
Whoops. And I want you to hear from this gentleman as well. He was actually in my office last week, and I mentioned I was going to be here, and you can hear his message.
So before I met you, I did not ever think about amplification. And I would get tired because I still work full-time, and I found that after 4 hours or so, my voice would deteriorate and be both physically exhausted and also not be able to say the things I needed to in a way that was helpful for my professional life. I would say it has been a life changer and has totally extended the potential I have to work full time, and it has dramatically increase my quality of life. I would tell anyone if they think they are doing themselves a favor by not employing this, not getting used to using the amplification technology, they are wrong. The benefits are multiple and massive.
And again, this gentleman, knowing I was going to be here, wanted to make sure that he shared that information with you. Voice and voice preservation. I believe, and we've said at our center for a long time now, that our voice is our acoustical fingerprint. That you say something and people immediately recognize it as you. We've all heard someone say, oh, it's so nice to hear your voice when you've seen someone or a phone call has been made. I want to highlight a few different strategies that focus on preserving voice. Voice banking, the message banking process, a new double dip, and then talk about the fact that we'll be able to offer this to you in many languages within the next few months. So first of all, let me talk about voice banking, and I'm going to circle back with video demonstrations of this. Historically, one has, if you've wanted to think about creating a synthetic voice that sounds like you, what you've needed to do is sit in front of your computer and read several hundred, actually almost 2,000 nonsense sentences that are designed to capture all of the speech sounds, all of the co-articulated speech sounds in the English language. Then all of those are taken and analyzed by the company to create a synthesizer that sounds like a person. And many people, understandably, have said to me, you know, when I talk, my voice, again, the acoustical fingerprint, is really something that identifies me. And if ever during any part of the day I was too fatigued to speak independently, I'd want to make sure I represent that. One of the challenges, and the continued challenges with voice banking and creating a synthetic voice at the moment, is that even if it sounds a lot like a person, it's currently difficult to infuse emotion, humor, sarcasm, those sorts of things. So a bunch of years ago, actually grown out of work that we were doing in the pediatric intensive care unit almost 25 years ago, we started doing what's called message banking. And that's capturing messages, phrases, sounds in your authentic delivery. And the message banking process really requires kind of supporting someone through that process, shepherding them through how to do this, and then ultimately making sure that we've got material that could possibly be incorporated into technology if someone ever needed to use it. And that could be, I work with people currently who are using messages that they have recorded on their iPhone, because within recent months, some of the app developers are allowing us to put these messages in. And I'm working with other people who are using that technology or those messages in technology that they are controlling completely with their eyes from their bed or from somewhere else. Double dipping. So for as long as we've been doing this and people have said, hey, I want to create that synthetic voice because I might not record something now that I'll want to say later and I want it to sound like me. We've been saying to lots of companies that are doing voice banking, can't you just take all of these spectacular, authentic, banked messages that people have done and use them? And they've all said no, 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 we can't do that. Finally, one company, and now because of their success, others are saying, oh, we need to get on this bandwagon. So I'm going to show you some of these examples, have said yes. And I think that we have been able to accomplish something pretty nice that you could jump into doing right now. Remember, I started out saying knowledge is power, being proactive, far better to do something and never need it and never need to use it than in the heat of the moment realize that you either wished you had done it or want to do it but feel that there are too many constraints. And I think this is one of those examples. So I want to play a few different videos, and this first one is actually a montage of a number of people who have banked messages following our message banking process, and then they're embedded in technology. And people have given me permission to show these to you so you can kind of get a sense of some of the messages. And you're going to hear some are humor and fun, and some are self-advocacy, and here we go.
ALS sucks.
Walker, come here, Walker. Walker, come on. Walker, come here, Walker.
I can't believe it.
Are you serious? Dude!
Good morning, puppy. Hello, Tweety. Hello.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Abby.
I love you, Jimbo.
That is absolutely ridiculous. I love it. Ay, ay, ay.
I think you're wonderful. I think you're wonderful.
I love having it said twice to me.
Everything pales beside my wife.
I'm so glad that you recorded these.
Now this gentleman, and this was yesterday, this gentleman allowed me to edit this to show you. He had done a lot of message banking. Following our message banking process, he had recorded lots of messages. He was very aware of, well, what if there are things that I want to say? I want them to sound like me. Following our double dip model, we were able to kind of take all of those messages that he did authentically, send it to this company, and have a voice created. So he's actually hearing the voice now. This is about 20 minutes in. And then he had decided, and he has a very sophisticated vocabulary. So he had decided that he was going to come up with some of his typical phrases. And you'll hear, he is still speaking. His speech is different, but he's going to speak it and then play it with the voice that was created.
The cold day in April,
Oops.
and a filthy wind blew through the doors of Victory Garden. It was a cold day in April, and a filthy wind blew through the doors of Victory Garden. That's fantastic. That is really good. Peremptory guidance, parliamentary provocation. Peremptory guidance, parliamentary provocation. It's very, very good.
Now I want to use the term peremptory guidance in pretty much every conversation I have with people. Jane is a woman, and you'll note a little bit of a southern accent. She, again, following the message banking process, has banked about 1,500 messages, and you'll hear now I'm combining, I'm comparing them.
Do you know how much I love you?
That is synthetic.
Clearly there's emotion that is in the authentic message.
Excuse
Do
me.
you know how much I love you?
Excuse me, that was the synthetic.
Now let's listen to the actual .wav file.
And then this is her.
Do you know how much I love you?
Clearly there's emotion that is in
And in the interest of time, I'm just going to play one more. This gentleman lives down in Florida. He has a sharp sense of humor. He constantly gives me grief about the fact that he is in sunny Florida and I am not. In the middle of the winter, we had created his voice, and so knowing his sense of humor, I sent him this video so he could hear the voice that was created from all of his banked messages. So the very first message, he actually never said. But when I sent this to him, he sent me an email saying, "Yep, that's exactly what I want to say to you, Costello." And then the next two you'll hear are comparing.
Hi, I live in sunny Florida. Sucks that you have snow in Boston.
Okay, now
So that
I'm
was
going
synthetic.
to do actual comparisons side by sides,
Can I have a glass of water?
and now the synthetic.
Can I have a glass of water?
Okay, here's another one.
Call us when you get there.
All right.
Call us when you get there.
And then just one final that I want you to hear. And I highlight this because many people have said, "Oh, but I shouldn't do this now. My speech is so different from what it used to be. I shouldn't do this." And, you know, we don't know the outcomes until we try to analyze it. So nothing can be promised. But I do want you to hear this gentleman's messages and then the synthetic voice created from his messages, where his speech was pretty impacted.
Can I have some mayonnaise on my sandwich?
And now I'm typing it in to speak it in the synthetic voice.
Can I have some mayonnaise on my sandwich?
So I think that what you can hear there is that even with his impacted speech, there's at least the possibility, and we should at least try to see if we can create something that, that would be useful, that would be meaningful, that would sound like one's authentic self. I want to talk now about what we're calling the democratization of assistive technology. And what I mean by that is the fact that a few years ago, if you were thinking about assistive technology, you would undoubtedly be introduced to a tool that you had never seen before, that was sort of in some specialty location and where you needed to get lots of heavy training with how to use it. And there still is a lot of that, but there also is an awful lot of tools that we all use every day that can be used for augmentative communication. So I want to show you, again in my limited time, a couple of examples of using the iPad. And I'm demonstrating the iPad for someone who might have difficulty using their hands. And so now there's the option of accessing language apps on the iPad, only a couple so far, using head movement, using the newest camera built in. So this is, we have been doing beta testing with different developers. And I'm doing all this by moving my head.
Using facial recognition and head and eye movement, I am typing with my iPad.
And I made this yesterday using my iPhone. You can see.
Hello.
And I purposely put a paper clip there so you can see this is done on a phone. So there is more and more movement towards some off-the-shelf technologies being able to be used for assistive technology for augmentative communication. Also want to show you, some people may know that Microsoft has worked on changing Microsoft Windows 10 so that it can actually be fully accessed with one's eyes. You just need to have the eye gaze bar. We've been really lucky to be working with Microsoft Research and trying things out and giving them feedback. And so this is a very quick demonstration of, so if you have Microsoft Windows 10 right now, and if you go through the interminably long process of doing the most recent update, try doing it before it does it when you don't want it to, then you could turn on eye tracking, and if you have an eye tracking bar connected, so this is on my, my Surface Pro, and what I'm doing, what I actually did with my eyes was I went and I hit that little button in the top to close the page. Then I've opened a keyboard, and now I'm typing. And sorry, I didn't record it well enough. It actually did just speak out the message as well. So that's all available now. There's more work to be done. There's more tweaking to be done. And one of the things that Microsoft is focusing on is, well, how do we now build in all of these efficiency strategies? How do we help make some of the things that we know allows access to language efficient available in this? You saw some word prediction, having pre-stored phrases, being able to do what you currently can do in Word, hit 2 letters and have it expand into an entire sentence, building that in so that people have as much efficiency as possible. Another democratization. Many, many people have Amazon Alexas. Many, many people have Google Homes. This is a demonstration of using Alexa.
Alexa, turn on living room light.
Using eye tracking on a communication device to control the environment.
Alexa, dim living room light.
Okay.
Alexa, living room light full brightness.
Okay.
Alexa, turn off living room light.
And many people now are actually thinking about recording.
Alexa, volume 8.
Okay, I'll end that. Many people are actually thinking about recording messages for home automation. And I want to get into another project in a moment, but first show you this. Environmental control. You know, one of the things, so my colleagues, Megan and Peggy, are doing a home visit with someone who's using this technology for communication, but he also very much wants to make sure that he is controlling the remote.
Go to edit homepage.
The TV remote.
Go to add page sets. Go to text communication. And then go down at the left there, that down button. And then select a different TV remote.
What goes? It's coming out.
Okay, let's test these buttons.
And so now he's able to pull up his choices, etc.
Yeah.
Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but his aide had been quite excited. And then he suddenly realized that he was no longer going to be able to have any control over what was on TV. His excitement sort of abated a bit. Also want to talk about, you know, I said at the very beginning, communication, writing, texting, email, internet. All of that I ask you, when you sit down at your computer, what is the first thing you touch? The mouse. Well, if there's some reason it's hard to consistently use the mouse, you want to have alternative access to that. And there are a lot of strategies for alternative access to the mouse. And so here are just 3 that are available. There is the Origin head mouse. There is this system called Glasshouse out of Europe. There is the Cozono head mouse, which is a gyroscopic head mouse. And I throw this out to you simply so you know there are options. There are lots of different potential strategies to be using. Using a switch, we work with a lot of people who wind up using switches as a way of either scanning through to make selections on their computer, or they maybe using eye tracking will look at something, but they want full control over what is selected, and so nothing is selected until they hit a switch. Switchless clicking. There are lots of ways that someone can have control on of their computer for writing without having to hit switches using kind of on-screen targets. And there are so many different controls to be able to do this. I wanted to mention again, speaking of democratization again, Google and Google Home. Some of you may have recently seen an announcement about Project Euphonia. And that is something the CEO of Google had announced now 2 weeks ago publicly. And I've been really thrilled to be able to work with some of the folks at Google on at least the beginnings of this, where their goal is to make sure that if someone ever has difficulty producing speech in the typical manner, as clearly as possible, that they can still control home automation by talking, even if your speech isn't clear. And so they're doing a lot of work with looking at taking dysarthric speech, and that's the term that's used to describe that change in speech that so many people with ALS experience, and making sure that even with dysarthric speech, home automation will understand you. And part of the reason that announcement went out was because they want to sort of be able to grow this as much as possible to make sure that anyone, regardless of their speech characteristics, will be understood. And in order to do that, they want to have many, many, many samples. I can tell you that beyond this, there are some really exciting things that they would like to do that we've been kind of talking about. And so even if you wind up contributing, if you see this link and you sign up and you contribute recordings, even if it doesn't create something that you can use immediately, and I tell everyone, if you're participating, it's for the greater good. It's not for a promise for something that you can use right now. They're already looking at, if we can make it work for one thing, then there's more that we can build out of that. Knowing that companies like Google, like Amazon, like Microsoft are working on making their typical products available for folks who have difficulty with speech. You know, we do a lot with looking at how to integrate into the technology people have all the controls. We talked about environmental control. One additional strategy that many people have been interested in is iDrive. And so the ability to use one's communication device, one's computer, which is being used as a communication device, to also drive a wheelchair is something that is now available. There's more and more kind of research looking at what chairs and how it can be used. So in our center, we're looking at using iDrive as a way not to be looking at wheelchair mobility specifically, but looking at integration into augmentative communication technology. And you'll see this video And what's a little difficult to see on the screen is that there are arrows on going up, down, left, right, and depending upon where this man looks, his chair is driving. And if he looks off the screen at all, it stops. And then many people ask all the time about brain-computer interface. There have been lots of articles published recently, magazine articles, et cetera, talking about how having electrodes on the brain allows someone to do, and depending upon what you're reading, there are many, many different things that are suggested. My understanding, our understanding, is that BCI, brain-computer interface, is not there yet as sort of a viable, anyone could be using this kind of strategy, but it is something that people are beginning to use functionally more and more for communication, for environmental control. There are different types of brain-computer interface. This gentleman is using something that's totally reading. There are receivers under this cap on his head. That's called non-invasive. There's invasive BCI where there are electrodes that are placed, or receivers that are placed right on the brain. And so again, just knowing that these technologies for communication, for environmental control are out there, and more research and development is being done in these areas. And I think I am within a minute of time, which if you knew me well, you would know was like a miracle. My parting comments. 1, be proactive. As I said, far better to do something early and not need it than to not do it and wish you had. Take control. So many people that we work with have told us that they absolutely feel that they are in control of so much more because they've learned. They've often, and people will sit in our office and tell us flat out, yeah, thanks for telling me that, never. I'm not going to do that. I will do that. But they are taking control under situations where they are able to be most informed and most collaborative in the process. Also know that your team needs your guidance. And so, you know, one of the things that I have so greatly valued from the people I get to work with is the fact that people can give me feedback about what they like, what they don't like. I can go back to developers, whether it's one of those companies we've talked about or one of the software developers for these communication systems, and say, this is what people are asking for, and many times they're listening, they're doing it. And so we really need that guidance in order to not only meet your needs, but the needs of other people. And then again, I started out saying knowledge is power, and I really believe having information really allows one to, again, be most in control. So thank you so much for your time, and if there are questions, I'd be delighted. Thank you. Thank you. Anything?
Hi. It was a really exciting presentation.
Oh, thank you.
We can underscore the message of proactivity. My spouse's speech was has been the first to go and really it went faster than one would imagine. We did voice banking, went through the entire hundreds of whatever, you know, what you described, but even we did it a little too late. If we had done it 60 days earlier, it would be different. So the interesting, my comment and then a question is that if anybody is beginning to suspect the speech is becoming a little less clear than you want, and you want to preserve your old voice the easy way, don't wait, because waiting even 60 days changes it. So that's my second question. Was I hearing you say that if someone has done voice banking, but it's not quite as good as you would like it, and therefore she is reluctant to use it, it can be reprocessed or somehow manipulated to make it more effective?
So the video that you saw with the gentleman whose voice his speech was pretty impacted, and the voice created sounded like him, but to most people is more intelligible, is something, we've had that experience a couple of times. And so I want to stop short of saying, yes, we can do that, because that's a promise. And we don't know enough yet about the variables. For example, I believe in part what contributed to his working out so well is even when he recorded and his speech was impacted, it was dysarthric, his pacing was such that he spoke like this. There was a clear break between each word. And I think that that contributed to our ability to, or Acapella specifically, which is the company I'm working with that has done this, to creating that clearer voice. But we definitely don't want to say that we can do voice reconstruction or voice repair, more specifically. It is worth investigating, especially if someone has enough raw material, and enough raw material is probably about 750 to 800 messages that are about 4 seconds each, then it's worth investigating. Okay. There's another question.
Are you aware of any centers where one could go try out these technologies to explore how they work before purchasing?
Yes, and it's also a really good question, because I want to underscore, you bring up a really important point, which is evidence-based practice, that someone should not only try out all of these tools, but try them out not just in a clinic. We happen to really believe, and I know a lot of my colleagues around the country believe, that if there's a tool that's identified as a good match for you, the real test is if you can take it home and try it out for a while and collect data. And more of the manufacturers are allowing that. They're providing loaner devices, equipment, so that that evidence can be collected. So what you want to do, though, is first of all make sure that you are working with someone who's able to at least expose you to as many of these tools and devices as possible, so you can kind of, we call it a feature match. You look at all of the features of the different tools and strategies and what an individual's needs are, and then try to select there, then gather evidence before you go to insurance to ask them to buy something, especially because these days with insurance, once you have it, it's really difficult to ask them a second time within a short window. Thank you so much.
Really wonderful presentation, wonderful set of presentations. I want to thank everybody who was presenting today. I want to thank everyone for being here. This is a really exciting event. It's an incredible time in ALS. I think that we are turning a corner in a way that we really can't say that we ever have in the past. And what's on the horizon and what's here in combination are really amazing. I want to invite everybody for sort of refreshments, cocktail hour in Salon 3, which is to the right if you exit the doors. And we can continue conversations there. Thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for the MDA for putting on the event today.